Absolutely right. Look, there are 3 points in Tony Burke's plan to increase wages, and all of them are absolutely terrible. First, he wants to use regulation to force wages higher by putting the Fair Work Commission onto the case. Second, he wants to change the IR system to give unions greater bargaining power. And third, he wants to put a stop to the heinous crime he calls wage theft. Look, Amanda, the idea that government can somehow force employers to raise wages seems a fantasy to me. And in any case, yeah, I mean, what do you think? It's productivity, isn't it, that's the real problem here?
But productivity is always at the core of what's necessary to drive the wages of existing employees up. Unions have been really resistant to any kind of measure that might have helped to drive productivity. All throughout our efforts during the last government, Labor stood in the way of any industrial relations reform that would have helped with that productivity. And now they're signalling they want to additionally unionise and provide greater opportunities for those productivity-resistant unions to have more influence and more ability to exercise demands effectively, despite that resistance to the two-way street that is productivity for increased wages. It's a recipe for disaster. The only places you can think of where the centralised government setting of wage rates works, or maybe history shows us it doesn't work at all, are in the communist states. And it just is a matter of time before those become failed states.
Well, of course it can't work. And the other strange idea just behind Labor's thinking is they seem to think that the solution to higher prices is higher wages. Now, Amanda, I doubt if you remember very clearly the wage spirals that occurred in earlier periods of inflation, but I'm sure you've read the textbooks on this. What do you think?
It's just common sense, isn't it? If you want to pay the worker more to produce the thing that gets sold in the shop, the thing becomes more expensive, and then everybody needs pay rises to pay for the more expensive thing. You can't operate this way. It doesn't make sense. And unless they confront the reality that says starting this discussion at the end of the wage packet of working people, while very important in the day-to-day lives of everyone, is actually putting the cart before the horse. And it means that you are in this spiral that will just make everything continue to get more expensive. That's not a solution for inflation. It's a recipe for more of it.
It's got to end in tears, isn't it? Definitely. But I think the problem with Tony Burke is he seems to be fixated on one particular part of the job market, the unionised sector, which is what it's largely the public sector. So we, the taxpayers, have to pay that one. Or the large industries, like mining, shipping and so forth, where big unions do have big power and they're dealing with big corporations. Very different though, isn't it?
And that really does...
Yeah, go on.
Sorry. It really does reflect, though, in the ways that they approach policy across the board, because they all come out of unions from the public sector or from those big businesses. All their policy is driven around big companies with big resources or big government departments for whom you can throw around terms like wage theft and it might be meaningful. But the reality of most of the cases where we've seen underpayment of wages, and that is serious, those cases have involved small businesses who have been weighed down under the burden of complexity in the administration of their business. They've been trying to do the right thing and either got bad advice or ineffectively executed their attempt to honestly fulfil their obligations, and yet these people are being called criminals by those in Labor. You can't get on top of these economic problems unless you understand that small businesses really matter, that their contribution is huge, and you can't try and shut them all down just because they're not unionised.